Football team, let's go!
How has combat changed me? Well, it's changed me in quite a few ways. I've learned a lot about myself, I've learned a lot about life, all sorts of things, but we gotta start with the most obvious one. I learned what death is. When a jet comes by, shut the stop. Death is that guy who gave you the time of day. Death is that soldier who gave you his patch off his shoulder in gratitude. And it's that friend you haven't texted in a month. Death never comes when you expect it either. You'll see faces of those you lost in strangers at the grocery store. You'll have to mourn with the family over messenger apps while you're conducting the same sort of mission that they've just gotten killed in. And you'll remember the impossibility of that person dying when you're being bombarded yourself. You'll think about their death for a month very hard. And it'll come up on you when you least expect it. I was playing some Terraria recently. What came to mind? Well, of course, Zoffer, who showed it to me originally in Syria. How about when I listened to Nine Inch Nails, my favorite band? I have one of their album covers tattooed to my arm. Who comes to mind? Zoffer, the one who showed it to me in Syria. Welcome back, everybody. How about watching Penguin Zero, Moist Critical on YouTube? Well, Rashid, of course, that was one of his favorite channels. How about the smell of diesel? That reminds me of digging out the tunnels with Fedekar. I can hear his voice when I think about it too hard. The red sunsets, the yellow sunrises, they are all attached to very nice memories with my friends who fell. That's the truth, and you never forget them. They never come out of your mind. So that's what death is for me. For myself, I didn't know any of this until I went to war. What else did war teach me? I'm notoriously terrible at messaging back to people. People that I care about, my friends, good friends. There's drones to be built. There's work to be done, a life to be lived in the moment. And also for myself, it's scary to talk to them because I get worried. I get worried for them. When I see the group chats, when I see their messages, it's almost always something that's kind of sad because they're in war still. A lot of them are. I am simultaneously terrified to have a strong connection with friends I care deeply about, and also have a weird, I don't feel worthy of texting them just because I'm not there right now, even though they wouldn't say the same. I've never had friends disown me because I'm not there anymore. I've done my fair share of stuff. I'm looking out for myself. I'm taking a break. I'm 28 years old. There's other parts of my life that I want to pursue. But yeah, that's something that changed me. I don't get connected to too many people anymore. I have too many brothers to count, and this goes for anybody who's been to war. You know, it's said that there's a reason that a company, a military company, 150 people, is the amount of people that it is. It's because as a human, you can't have a strong connection with more than 150 people. But what happens when you go on harrowing operations with your unit, your 30-guy unit? You guys become blood brothers in a different way, and your 150 people starts adding up pretty quickly, added on to the people that you have back home. So I don't have many friends from my high school anymore. I don't think I have even one. No, okay, I've got one, but he's also military. It's very difficult for me to go and hold on to friendships just because there's so many people that I care about, you know, and same goes for them. The next way war changed me is I became a minimalist. I don't buy all the new stuff. This is like one of the cheapest microphones you can buy. This is the same GoPro I've had for the last 10 years. I bought it just before going to Syria. My phone, it's an iPhone SE. This iPad, this was how I edited videos for the longest time. And this is not how you should edit videos if you have a YouTube channel. I don't need all the fancy stuff. These are all souvenirs they're given to me. I never bought any of this stuff. I served in these units. This shirt, 10 years ago, I bought it at Goodwill. I made it into a cutoff, and you can find videos from 7 years ago where I'm wearing the same shirt. I just learned to be budget friendly, I guess. How much money did I make in Syria? 70 bucks a month. And now at the current exchange rate, it's probably worth about 7 cents. I still have that money. I didn't spend it. It's just in my van somewhere in the parking lot. It's kind of funny. You learn how to use hand-me-downs. You learn to work with what you have, and you learn that you don't need much. That's all I'm trying to say. You also learn that the world is small. How many times? Oh my Lord. Especially in the foreign fighter community. Whoa. It is small. When I showed up to Kiev back at the beginning of the war, I never thought I'd see any of my friends from Iraq ever again. I thought that was one part of my life, and I'll never see them again. They were great friends, everything. First face that meets me as soon as I get to Kiev. Kamal. You know, I see Kamal. Oh my God, I never even knew he was in Ukraine. I thought I was never going to see him again. Well, he's right there in front of me. I have had more than one of those instances. And after I met Kamal, a couple months later, I joined a unit working out east. And who was the guy who invited me over? An old Marine Corps acquaintance from like 6 years ago. Crazy small world. The next one is geopolitics. You know, there's a lot to be said about the news and being able to watch YouTube, watch my channel. I'll show you the reality. I'll be able to show you my perspective as well. But it's a whole nother thing to go there. It's a whole nother thing to smell the air and to walk through the tunnels and to go down this street in Ukraine. And that's where you learn the most about what's actually going on. You learn about what all this actually means. And I've just found for myself, I have always been surprised when I go to these different places. I've always been surprised. It is not what I expected it to be. You know, like when I went to Syria, you think that I thought I was gonna get my throat slit by somebody? Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I was gonna be kidnapped and killed and my video shown on Live Leak. It was very different. I was handed chai and I was handed everything. I was gifted a coat by a random Kurd who knew it was my birthday. I was told very different things back in the Marine Corps, back in the US in general. And it almost always has to do with the human factor. You know, I've been with people that I thought I would never be able to be friends with. But despite their political leanings and what I believe, I was able to become friends with every single one of them. So yeah, you learn that humans are human. That's a good way to put it. I learned that the best feeling you can have in life, better than anything, at least for me, was walking down the street with a coffee in hand, watching the cars go past and the families at the mall 3 hours after successfully completing a mission on the front line and coming home alive. We talk about soldiers being adrenaline junkies. A lot of the foreign fighters are adrenaline junkies. They're there for a good story adventure. But how do you think you would feel after coming home to your city right after saving your friends, completing a very difficult tasking, using your courage and intuition, and being told, great job, by your command? And you're sitting there on that bench with the coffee, and you just got done with all that, and everybody's walking by. Don't you think you'd keep your head a little bit higher, your shoulders a little bit back? You wouldn't care that your hair is messy or that you're alone at that moment. You would sit there with nothing to doubt about yourself, completely unashamed and glad to be alive. There is no feeling in the world that can match that. There's nothing. You are your own hero for a day, and it adds on. The more you do it, the more you respect yourself. And overall, you know what really matters in life. Now, given that, there's also a bad part of that. You don't return from war without scars, either physical or mental. You'll also return home knowing that there will be nothing in your life that can compare to that feeling right after a mission. Look, I'm only 28 years old. I haven't had kids. I haven't gotten married yet. There's a lot of things that I'm excited to do, at some point in my life. But I find it hard to believe that there will be something that will match that. I really do. I've lived a long 28 years. I've done a lot of stuff. I've lived in a van, I've lived for myself, I've lived for others, but the best feeling in the world is living for others and permanently changing your character and who you are. You learn who you are on the battlefield. That's where I had the most character development. Maybe that's because that's how I live my life so far. I'm sure that anybody can develop their character over time. I think that's how it goes. But that was the way I did it, and I look at myself differently now. I know my positive attributes, and I know my negative ones. But it's just that knowledge of who you actually are. It's just indescribable how freeing it is. You know who you are now. I've changed from an extreme introvert, like very, very introvert, to very much so an extrovert. Somebody who's good at public speaking, all these things. And yeah, that's another thing I learned. In war, there's combat, but there's also training. And especially when you gain a lot of experience and you gain different skills that are useful to other people, you'll probably find yourself instructing at some point. I've learned how to public speak because of my instructing background. Partly because of YouTube, but mostly because of instructing. When I was instructing in Ukraine, in Iraq, and Syria, and even afterwards to different militaries around the world, I am now a pretty good public speaker. I'm not great. I'm not perfect. I don't have any training from it. I didn't go to college for it. I'm just okay with it now. And that is not where I thought I'd be. Like 10 years ago, if you told me I'd be, public speaking, talking about military stuff, and I'd have this experience behind me that was useful to other people, and I was able to talk about these things well, I would have said you're crazy. But yeah, learn how to public speak. Moving on, I learned how to cook. In Syria and Iraq, you don't have McDonald's, you don't have Taco Bell. We usually didn't even have a working car that we could even get to the city from. We were stuck in the tunnels. You had to learn how to cook. And it was made a lot easier because we had an Italian chef who was with us in Iraq. He was dope. He taught us everything. He taught us how to make pasta and sauce. That was the best thing. I'm gonna be eating the meal prep pasta that I made a couple days ago, right after this recording. My parents tried to teach me how to cook, but I was never interested until I was hungry. And I was never more hungry than I was at war. I also learned how to be a leader. The biggest leadership position I was ever in charge of was a squad leader. It was actually a platoon, but we only had like 12 guys. It was definitely a skeleton crew. But I had the taskings of that platoon leadership level, which meant I had to prepare positions, I had to plan operations, I had to plan rotation cycles, get logistics up, I had to make sure guys were getting trained, and I had to make sure everything was good. And it was a lot. I learned how to go and be in that position because it was a necessity. I had the most experience at that point, and would I go back to it? Probably not. I am a good follower, and I do prefer it that way. If somebody just tells me what to do, I like it. I also learned a lot of random stuff. How to make a drone, how to make it fly. I learned plumbing from the tunnels, and I learned electrical skills and hands-on knowledge on pretty much everything. Mostly a broom and a squeegee, but a lot of other stuff. Now, all of that being said, one of the biggest lessons that I learned was how to adapt back into society. And it took a lot of time, a lot of tears, anger, hatred, and grief. But I learned to forgive myself, and that was, wow, that took a while. That's a powerful thing. I have faced absolute shame. There have been points in my time from war to war that I have been covered in shame, but I learned to forgive myself and I learned to be useful outside of combat. There comes a time for every returning soldier where he has to let go of that shame and he has to move on. For me, it took about 3 deployments. The first deployment is indescribably hard, but the next ones are easier. It becomes routine and you learn to control your emotions and feelings. You learn how to distract yourself from intrusive thoughts of running away and chasing after old memories. Yeah, you learn how to adapt. And for me, it was quite the adventure. It took me down a lot of different paths, different wars, traveling across the world to different countries. But in the end, I'm able to adapt. I know who I am. I know what I enjoy doing. I like traveling. I like meeting different people and helping out in different ways. And it was worth it. You know, it was worth it to adapt. Had I not adapted and I just stayed in my sorrow and I stayed in my old memories, I would not be sitting here today. I wouldn't. And that's something that combat taught me. And overall in all this, I learned who I truly am. The psychological impact of war is very negative, but it's also very positive. If you look at it in a certain light, in a certain perspective, no matter the experiences you add, you don't even have to add them all up. You can take them separately and learn different bits and pieces of who you truly are. You can find out, okay, I went here and I did this operation, I did this thing in this operation, and this was my background in my life. This is why I did the things that I did. I was able to find myself. And, you know, of course, I'm gonna have more experiences and, you know, my story isn't done. And there's a lot more stuff that I'm cooking up. A lot of stuff. This drone included. But I can say pretty certainly, I have a pretty good grasp on myself. I know who I am. The deepest, darkest secrets, the stuff that you guys have heard about. I talk about everything on my channel. And also the triumphs, the good stuff. So, yeah, you know, that's how war changed me. There's a lot of other things, of course. I've learned how to have a YouTube channel. I wouldn't have this channel or wouldn't be continuing YouTube had I not done these things. This is why you guys watch me, to go and talk about war. I am lucky to be alive. You know, there's a lot of people that they're on that road and they don't make it. But for myself, I'm alive and I'm doing the best I can to be the best human that I can be, given the experiences that I have. How can I be most helpful? And again, that's like one of the greatest feelings you can have as a human is helping other people in your own way, in whatever way. Doesn't matter. Help people. It's very nice. All right. Well, that's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.